On its final day, 2,350 people rushed through the gates of the Ponderosa Ranch. They didn't come casually. They came knowing it was the last time. They came in cowboy hats and worn vests, clutching cameras and childhood memories. They came ready to say goodbye. By noon, the food was gone. By mid-afternoon, the gift shop shelves were bare. Even the beer ran out before the sun had climbed high. Grown men stood quietly near the cemetery ridge, brushing their hands across white wooden crosses as if they were touching something sacred. Families lingered at the entrance long after closing, whispering farewell like they were losing an old friend. Then, just like that, it was over. Within weeks, chain-link fences rose around the 570-acre property. Warning signs appeared. The laughter stopped, and the land that had welcomed millions for nearly 4 decades became silent. What happened next would remain unseen for years. For 22 years, no regular visitors walked those paths. No crowds gathered at the ranch house. No children lined up to ride fiberglass horses. And no cameras captured what time was doing behind the locked gates. Until someone finally returned. And what remained inside told a story no one expected. For 37 straight years, the Ponderosa Ranch had felt alive. Opened in 1968 near Incline Village at Lake Tahoe, it was built as a tribute to the legendary television series Bonanza. The show had aired 430 episodes and turned the Cartwright family into household names across America. Tourists kept asking the same question, where is the real Ponderosa? So Bill and Joyce Anderson built one. They constructed a full-scale replica of the Cartwright Ranch house, recreated Virginia city streets, built a wedding chapel, opened restaurants, and turned a fictional world into something visitors could step into. Over time, it became one of Lake Tahoe's most popular seasonal attractions. And in 2004, it was thriving. That's what makes the ending so hard to understand. That year, nearly 250,000 visitors passed through the ranch gates, the highest attendance in its history. The final weekend shattered every previous September record. On Saturday, 2,200 people arrived. On Sunday, September 26th, 2,350 visitors flooded in, the largest single-day crowd the park had ever seen. It wasn't dying. It wasn't failing. It was stronger than ever. But behind the scenes, something irreversible had already happened. In July 2004, software billionaire David Duffield quietly purchased the entire property for approximately $55 million. Public agencies had spent years assembling more than $50 million to buy the land and turn it into protected conservation space. They envisioned hiking trails, open access, environmental protection, a place preserved for everyone. They thought they had time. They didn't. Duffield's private offer was faster, cleaner, and slightly higher. The Anderson family accepted. Within weeks, the sale was finalized, and the countdown began. Visitors didn't get advance warning. Employees didn't receive a long goodbye. The closure felt sudden, almost unreal. One moment, families were riding wagons up the ridge and eating Ho's burgers. The next, everything was frozen. After September 26th, the gates shut. Fences went up, and silence settled in. The quiet that followed felt heavier than anyone expected. Buildings that had once echoed with laughter now stood still against the Sierra Nevada sky. Wind moved through empty doorways. Pine needles began to collect on wooden platforms. The same mountain air that had once carried children's laughter now carried nothing at all. But not everyone walked away. Volunteers from the Thunderbird Lodge Preservation Society rushed in almost immediately. They understood what harsh winters could do at 5,000 feet elevation. Snow loads, freeze-thaw cycles, intense ultraviolet exposure. The mountains are not gentle with abandoned wood. They treated the ranch like a fragile attic filled with memories. Wagons were hauled away. Buggies, mining tools, vintage, automobiles, hand-painted signs. Anything historically valuable was removed piece by piece before vandalism or weather could destroy it. One structure required extraordinary care: the small white wedding chapel. Originally built in 1871 in Northern California, it had been moved once before, relocated to the ranch, in the 1960s. For decades, it hosted as many as 15 weddings per week, nearly 780 weddings a year. Couples stood beneath its simple wooden beams, exchanging vows in a setting that felt timeless. When the ranch closed, the chapel fell silent again. Volunteers carefully labeled each plank. Every beam, every board was documented. The entire building was disassembled and transported more than 300 miles to Lommel, Nevada. Years later, it was rebuilt exactly as it had stood before, continuing its purpose in a new location. It survived, but many other pieces would not. The Cartwright ranch house, the centerpiece of the attraction, held secrets of its own. From the outside, it appeared to be a grand two-story home. Millions of viewers recognized it instantly from television, but the structure was an illusion. The second story was only a facade. Inside the ranch replica, visitors climbed stairs that led nowhere. The bedrooms from Bonanza had actually been filmed hundreds of miles away at studios in California. Only the living room, kitchen, dining room, and office truly existed on site. Even more surprising, the right side of the house had never been fully constructed. A nearby highway prevented full exterior filming, forcing camera crews decades earlier to shoot only from specific angles. Visitors who walked through often felt a strange sensation. Carved wooden figures of Ben Cartwright sat at a desk. Hop Sing appeared frozen mid-task in the kitchen. Costumes hung on racks, as if Little Joe or Haas might return at any moment. It felt alive, but it was never fully real. And now, even that illusion began to fade. The logs of the ranch house were carefully numbered and removed, stored in containers with hopes of future reconstruction. As of 2025, they still wait for funding. Where the house once stood, only foundations remain, hidden on private land, unseen for more than 2 decades. Deeper along an overgrown path stood the entrance to the old mystery mine. Families once lined up for the 50-foot fiberglass tunnel experience, where fake cave-ins and rumbling sound effects thrilled children. Brass gold nuggets scattered along the floor weighed about 2 ounces each, convincing enough to spark imagination. But few visitors knew about what happened in 2004. A short circuit caused a small fire inside the mine. Support timbers burned. 2 visitors were injured. The incident was quietly handled, noted in maintenance logs, but never widely publicized. Today, if you stepped inside with a flashlight, you would find collapsed beams and scattered props. The air would feel heavy. The tunnel that once amplified children's laughter now absorbs sound completely. Silence echoes differently underground. The Gunny Sack Cafe tells another story. From 1967 to 2004, it served as many as 1,000 ice cream cones per day during peak summers. The famous Bonanza Sundae was affordable and generous, a small indulgence families remembered for years. Ice cream that once cost 40 cents in the 1960s later rose to around $1.50 by the park's final years. Over 36 years, the neighboring Hoseberg Burger restaurant served more than 3 million half-pound burgers. Food tied memory to place. During the final weekend, visitors devoured everything. According to owner Royce Anderson, they ran out of nearly all supplies. People weren't just eating, they were trying to preserve taste as memory. Today, the cafe's foundation lies under pine needles. Metal frames twist in winter frost. Snow piles high against what remains. Nature supplies its own cold now, without needing a freezer. It's hard to imagine that 250,000 people once passed through those same wooden doors in a single year. Harder still to imagine that it all stopped in one afternoon. The cemetery ridge remains one of the most emotional parts of the story. White, wooden crosses once marked fictional graves of the Cartwright family's loved ones, including Ben Cartwright's 3 wives, Elizabeth, Inger, and Marie. There was even a marker for Little Joe's horse. When actors from Bonanza passed away, the ranch added memorial crosses for them too. Dan Blocker, who played Haas Cartwright, received a marker after his death in 1972. Blocker stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed over 300 pounds, yet portrayed one of television's most gentle giants. His sudden passing at age 43 stunned fans nationwide. Later, memorials were added for other cast members as they passed. Visitors stood quietly before those crosses during the final weekend. Some cried openly. After closure, the cemetery remained inaccessible, another memory sealed behind fences. Years passed. In 2016, David and Cheryl Duffield donated an 18.6-acre portion of the land, known as the Bullwheel property, to the Nevada Land Trust. This donation helped connect sections of the inclined flume trail, preserving scenic access and protecting Lake Tahoe's watershed. In 2021, that land officially entered the National Forest System. The larger 570 acres were allowed to return to nature. Without development, the forest slowly reclaimed what had once been bustling streets. Wheel ruts faded. Pine branches wrapped around old hitching posts. Fiberglass horses, once used for family photos, became half-buried under needles and ferns. Bright photo stations turned into ghostly shapes swallowed by the woods. It happened gradually, quietly, without ceremony. The Anderson family felt the weight of it deeply. On September 27, 2004, the morning after the gates closed, Royce Anderson stood watching the final visitors drift away. He later described it as the end of an era. Fans created petitions. Thousands signed pleas to save the ranch. Messages arrived from around the world. But the decision stood. The offer had been too strong. And the silence remained. Today, driving near Incline Village reveals little. Locked gates, dense pine forest, occasional glimpses of foundations hidden behind trees. Unless you know exactly where to look, you would never guess that for nearly 4 decades this mountain held a living piece of television history. Yet pieces survive elsewhere. Artifacts rest in climate-controlled vaults. The chapel stands again in Lommel. Plans to rebuild portions of the ranch in new locations have received tourism grants. Volunteers continue cataloging wagons, tools, signs, and memorabilia. Preservation is slow work. Heavy logs must be stored properly. Funding must be raised. Historical accuracy must be maintained. It is not glamorous. It does not move quickly, but it continues. Because to many people, the Ponderosa Ranch was never just a theme park. It was a place where fiction felt tangible, where childhood felt safe, where history and television blended into something you could touch, and where on one September afternoon, 2,350 people stood together, not because they had to, but because they wanted one last memory. Time has a way of softening noise. The crowds are gone. The burgers are no longer sizzling. The ice cream freezers no longer hum. But faint will tracks still press into the dirt if you look closely. Pine forests grow thicker around forgotten foundations. And somewhere in storage containers, numbered logs wait patiently for the day they might rise again. The Ponderosa Ranch did not disappear in flames or scandal. It ended in record crowds, in tears at the gates, in the sound of shelves being emptied, and in a silence that has lasted more than 2 decades. Yet in that silence, the story continues, carried by volunteers, by preserved artifacts, by couples still marrying inside a chapel that has already survived 2 lifetimes. And perhaps that is the real legacy. Not the buildings, not the fences, not even the land, but the fact that even after the gates were sealed, people still cared enough to remember. And sometimes memory is stronger than ownership.